So we had a really excellent financial services track. First of all, we heard from Travis Mosley at Capital One about merchant scams. It's the #1 reported scams worth about £4 billion, driven by the use of bogus adverts and websites. We heard a memorable badass recording of a victim about TikTok got me, and that really kind of brought it alive about how dealing with a customer and hearing customers. We also heard about Capital One's controls, need to make sure that we all prioritise the fight against scam. It's impacting not just the banks, but a much wider network. We heard about we need to put a program in place to deal with it in the company, strengthen KYC, increase financial penalties, share data, and go after the bad actors. And a really great proposition that Travis was open for other organisations to come and learn how they do it at Capital One. We then heard from Xin Ren at Feedzai, the Director of Data Science, about how you can use Gen AI in defences and how they deployed that at Feedzai, including a really excellent scam check tool for assessing the validity of scam adverts and messages by just taking a photograph of it on your phone and then going a Gen AI looking at all the information within the what the advertisement or message you've got and seeing what the red flags are and how that could be built into wider workflows. Xin spoke about how Gen AI can be used by financial services to prevent fraud, and key stats, 54% of financial institutions are using Gen AI globally. There's 1 trillion in productivity gains from using Gen AI, and AI models can be 100 times less costly than other solutions. We also heard about the risks and concerns associated with Gen AI, including the low barrier to entry for criminals, the scale and automation of attacks, but also problems like hallucination and bias, as well as privacy and regulatory concerns. Basically, we found that you need to use Gen AI to fight Gen AI. We then heard from Ranjita Iyer of Mastercard about the importance of multi-layered strategies to secure our digital frontier. And key facts what we picked up there is that each day there are 2.5 quintillion bytes of data generated, but that gives us a huge amount of information that we need Gen AI to be able to determine from that how we stop scams. We then had a fireside chat, 36 seconds, I can't believe it, from Lois Greisman on international cooperation from the Federal Trade Commission, who consider themselves the leading consumer protection agency. She talked about extensive collaboration through the global anti-fraud enforcement network. And we heard about the activity on direct mail scams and on tackling gift aids. We then ended up with about the defences we need to be put in place with Ron Long of the Moonshot Initiative and Andrea Robinette from the Bank of America, who told us that we really need to share information. Thank you.
So thank you very much. The next, I would like to invite Lynette from Trend Micro to speak about the cybersecurity track. Please give a warm welcome to Lynette.
Yes, I feel like I'm the first victim of scams here at the event since it says John Clay up there and not Lynette. That's okay. A couple of things. We actually had a very, very dense discussion with lots of presenters and panelists. I want to start by saying that education was a very common theme throughout, how much we still need to do that. And there's one ask that we have of the group, if I were to share something that I think hasn't been said yet. We need to reframe how we speak to consumers and not blame them. So the ask is to strike the phrase pig butchering from your vocabulary, because victims are not pigs. An alternative would be relationship investment scams as an option, or maybe you have a better option. But I think I wanted to make sure that that was said. We need to reframe and not blame. We were then presented by members of the UNODC about just how complex the threat is. They shared a little bit with us about the scam compounds that are popping up, hundreds of them in places like Southeast Asia, and even when law enforcement comes after them, they just shut down and move somewhere else. And that such kind of crime is actually multifaceted in terms of its victims, those who are being forced to do the scams and those who are being victimized by the scams. Finally, things are becoming more difficult even for law enforcement because of the use of AI. And I think that that has been a recurring theme as well. So I want to thank the UNODC for sharing all that they have with us. And it's good to know, though, that there is progress being made because of the collaboration among countries. One of the things they shared is that there's some type of scams that are being malware-driven, meaning a piece of malicious code that actually starts to do something like perpetrate identity theft. If I am able to get this on your system, I can find some personal information, and once I have that, I can now scam you. So the connection between scams and identity theft is quite integrated. Oh, sorry. It's quite integrated. And we then heard from Eva Velasquez from the Identity Theft Resource Center about exactly that. She also shared with us that from their victim call centers, there's quite a number of people who, when asked how they feel once they become victims, a high percentage feel violated, and 12% have said they contemplate suicide. So we really need to change how we do things in terms of intervening. Can we do that in the context of when they are doing something online? Is there a moment we can intervene with a message that will lower the risk of them potentially becoming a victim of scams or identity theft? We moved on to a quick little presentation from my colleague John Clay to share with you all a new app that we launched, Trend Micro launched, called Check. And this is an app that allows you to take a picture, send it in, and we'll let you know if it's an app. It also has a deepfake video flagging capability. So if anyone's interested, I still have a few free licenses, come find me. And we closed with two panels that actually talked about two different segments of the population, the youngest and the oldest. And the youngest, we continued the discussion, the moving discussion we had this morning about sextortion. There's one thing that came up in that discussion that I think you should all know, that children don't have the means and the money that older people do. So they're paying in smaller amounts through Cash App, through Apple Pay, through gift cards. If any of you have children for whom you have enabled Apple Pay, the default is that they can then send money on to anyone. Take a look at that if you're a parent and make sure that's not something you're allowing if you worry, because the criminals are both those who are perpetrating the crime, the sextortion, but also the crime for service people in the middle who are collecting the payments and sending them off. And finally, for the older adults, know that 1 in 5 people by the year 2050 will be over the age of 60. And the way that criminals have become more effective is that they take the moments that can heighten their emotional state, such as right now in the United States, it's Medicare enrollment time. So scams focused on hurrying to make sure you enroll and so on can be taken advantage. So I think the bottom line is we need to communicate with each other, communicate to consumers, do it early, do it often, do it tomorrow, do it the day after, and don't stop. I know I'm over time, but I felt really strongly to change that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynette. And I would like to invite the host of the telecom track, Kevin Rupee, to give his summary. Kevin, warm applause.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Kevin Rupee. I handled the telecom track. I'll say I'm an attorney by trade. They generally charge in 6-minute increments, so you're getting bang for the buck here today. But we had sort of two groups of panels, and the first group of presenters sort of looked back and looked at what has been happening in the marketplace in telecom. And the second group looked forward. How do we stay ahead of the curve? So on that first group, one of our presenters, Jessica Thompson from U.S. Telecoms Industry Traceback Group, she walked through their process that's been in place since roughly 2014. And the Industry Traceback Group can trace the origin of where these fraudulent calls are coming from. When they started this process back in 2014, it could take months if you ever even got to origination. As of today, they can trace back the origin of these calls, including to foreign destinations, within 24 hours. So it is a powerful tool. One of the things we learned from her presentation is that the mere traceback can stop those calls. Linda Vanderloop from AT&T used one of my favorite terms, the toolbox. She talked about how her company uses tools in the toolbox to mitigate fraud. Keeping with the theme of the international nature of this fraud, she talked about efforts like One Consortium and Giraffe that are expanding cooperation internationally. Aaron Chow from Scam Advisor talked about things that they're doing in Asia and how they're empowering consumers. And then Ben Davidson from the FTC talked about how we put all that together in enforcements. Second panel, Luigi Languido did a great job moderating. Sarah Legan from CTIA talked about how they are developing the secure messaging initiative to basically do the same thing on robocalls for text, to trace them back to their origin. John Briel from the National Consumer League talked about the importance of setting policies, working within existing frameworks like the Consumer Advisory Committee at the FCC to set policies and recommendations, particularly as they relate to AI. Sarosh Shabuddin from Pindrop talked about the emergence of deepfakes, AI deepfakes, and Dmitry Velikov from F-Secure talked about how they want to merge all channels. And I'll wrap up with Tony Lutz from Verizon, who talked about some of the new things that are coming out, like branded calling and collaboration with the banking industry. So emerging trends, new solutions, collaboration.
Bravo. So this was the first time a chair set his own alarm clock, making sure he's on time. Great. Next, Jonathan from Blockchain. Jonathan, if I may invite you. And again, guys, warm applause.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you. So let's talk about blockchain for a second. Right now, Bitcoin is at $93,000. The daily trading volume is 270 billion today. Let's put that in perspective. In the last year, MasterCard and Visa processed about $25 trillion worth of transactions. In this year alone, as of November 13th, there have been $120 trillion traded in crypto. This is a real thing. Whether or not you believe in crypto, it does not matter. It believes in you. So we look at blockchain, we have to start thinking about demystifying the fear that people have. It is just another means for people to move money and move information. That's what it's used for. And the idea of thinking through that it's replete with criminal activity, I hope, is in the dark ages. But what we now need to focus on is how do we look to secure that rail, secure that means of communication and transmission of information. So what we focused on was left of boom and right of boom. And his idea in both of them, we need better education about what's going on. We need better tools so people can be better prepared to understand what's happening, how to enforce the law, how to protect people from fraud, how to enforce compliance. And we did that by focusing on one at the industry level. What's going on from trends and typologies? We then broke down to businesses themselves, Coinbase, MasterCard, CoinFlip, looking at the different areas from the exchange to a network to Bitcoin ATM operators to small exchanges to say, what's happening that you're doing to have protecting your customers, but how do scams also impact your business? Because that's a real thing. Quick aside to that, because $93,000 where it makes me very sad is I am a scam victim myself. My brother and I years ago were operating probably on a shady VPN and potentially at an exchange in Jakarta we should not have been working with, but we had 300 Bitcoin and we ended up sending them to a wallet and that got scammed and pulled, and that 300 Bitcoin today would be $27 million. And every morning, my brother messages me and says, 24 million, 25 million, 26 million. So it's a real thing we have to be prepared for. So that's a customer impact. But then how do governments and law enforcement look at the laws that apply today in this new space? They are inadequate. We need to update them. We need to give government and regulators better tools to prepare and protect the consumer. Then you move past that. How does technology actually apply in this space? People are creating interesting solutions to stop scammers, whether it is AI versus AI, or whether it is predicting when fraud's going to occur and stopping it, or tracing it across the blockchain. These things are coming into fruition. And what I say to everybody, don't be afraid of crypto or blockchain. Engage, work with it, test it out, go buy something, go send somebody money. It is another means that's advancing civilization to allow us to connect globally in an interoperable way. But we have to keep it safe, we have to keep it secure, and we have to continue to build trust. Thank you.
So, Jonathan, one question. I assume you are also quite a heavy investor in crypto. Is that correct?
Maybe lost some money.
Lost some money. Okay. I wanted to discuss upgrading your membership, but then maybe we do that at another time. Certainly not least, Abigail, may I give the floor to you? A warm applause, please.
Hello, hello. Oh, I'm already going, okay. So our session was all about customers' digital experience. And so when we were planning this session, I talked to Sam and I was like, can we please not do a platform session? Can we like actually talk about shared interest and customer problems that we have to work through? And so what we did was we put ourselves, like any good Amazonian, in the shoes of a customer, in the shoes of a consumer. And in talking about where we can sort of help customers when they need it most, two themes sort of surface, and there'll be no surprise to anybody in this room. One is you have opportunity through education. The other is through the user experience itself, right? Through friction and disruption and all that, right? Everybody's like nodding their heads. But there's challenges with both of those things, right? From the education front, it needs to be timely, needs to be relevant, simple, consistent. Christine from FINRA had a really good catchphrase where she said, education needs to be in surround sound, which I thought was a powerful phrase. The user experience side, friction is good, but it needs to change constantly. We heard from Matt at AnyDesk who's like, listen, we would put in all sorts of different points of friction, and people just got conditioned to the friction. They're like, oh yeah, I pushed that button. Yeah, I'm not a bot. Yeah, I'm a human being. And you have to kind of change it up every single time in order for people to not become sort of immune and conditioned to the frictions you're putting in place. And so when you think about solutions to these challenges, oh wow, I'm doing great. There's a couple things that we talked about. On the user experience side, we talked about the role of biometrics. We talked about the role of open standards. And on the education side, we talked about building social norms, whether that's a common tagline, a common call to action, whether it's things like take a pause, like they do in other sectors, whether that's sort of safety or aviation, actually. And one of the ideas that was really kind of interesting is, what if all these companies had a scam victim in residence to help call out some of the things that are sort of percolating? And I thought that was super interesting. In conclusion, friction is key, but we still need education. And that's, and since I have you here, no, just kidding.